All right, today we're tackling a truly massive topic, the Eastern Front of World War II. This was one of the biggest and most brutal conflicts in all of human history, and we're going to break it down.
So let's just jump right in with a mind-blowing fact. When Germany invaded the Soviet Union, it was, quite simply, the largest military invasion ever. We're talking millions of soldiers on a battlefield that stretched across an entire continent.
So, to really get a grip on what happened, you have to understand just how huge this battlefield was. This wasn't a war fought in a single country. This was a conflict that spanned thousands of miles.
So what did this landscape even look like? Well, a huge part of it is something called the steppes. Just picture these enormous, wide-open grasslands that go on and on, as far as you can see. Now, that's perfect for tank battles, right? But imagine being a soldier on foot out there. It's terrifying. There is absolutely nowhere to hide.
Okay, let's get to the starting point. It's the summer of 1941, and a very tense peace is about to be shattered. Germany launches a massive surprise attack, and it's got a code name, Operation Barbarossa.
And they didn't just attack, they used a special tactic called blitzkrieg. In German, that literally means lightning war. And the name says it all. The whole idea was to be so fast, so sudden, and so overwhelming that the other side simply wouldn't know what hit them.
So, how did it work? You can think of it like a 1-2-3 punch. First, bam, you hit them with everything you've got. Planes, tanks, the whole deal. Then, before they can recover, you race deep into their territory. And the final blow? You grab their key cities and cut off their supplies. Game over. Or so they thought.
But here's the thing. That lightning-fast success didn't last. The reality of fighting on the Eastern Front was, well, it was unbelievably brutal and unforgiving.
And a huge part of that brutality wasn't even the enemy soldiers. It was the weather. I mean, it was an enemy all on its own. Summers were scorching hot, with clouds of dust that got into everything and choked engines. And then came the winters, which were on a whole other level.
See, the Germans figured this would be a quick fight. Over before the cold set in, they were wrong. So, their soldiers were totally unprepared for what was coming. We're talking temperatures dropping to minus 40 degrees. At that point, metal is so cold that your weapons literally freeze solid and engines just won't start. It's unimaginable.
And if the insane heat and cold weren't enough, there was something else in the spring and fall. The locals called it Rasputitsa. It's basically the mud season. But this isn't just a few puddles. We're talking a sea of thick, sticky mud that would swallow roads whole. Entire armies, with all their tanks and trucks, would just get stuck, completely halted.
So try to put yourself in a soldier's shoes for a second. Your daily life is just a struggle to survive. You're always hungry, you're sleeping in a frozen ditch, and you can be attacked at any second. And on top of all that, you are thousands of miles from anyone or anything you know.
And the danger wasn't just coming from the front either. Behind the German lines, a different kind of war was being fought. Groups of Soviet civilians and soldiers, called partisans, used their local knowledge. They knew every forest, every swamp, to launch surprise attacks. They were like ghosts, sabotaging supplies and communications.
Okay, so things look pretty grim. But this is where the story starts to change. Two cities, Leningrad and Stalingrad, are about to become the sites of battles that will completely flip the script on this war.
First up, Leningrad. The city was completely surrounded by the German army for almost 900 days. That's nearly 2.5 years. Can you even imagine? It was one of the longest, most horrific sieges in all of history, with the people inside facing starvation and constant bombardment.
But the real, absolute turning point of the war happened in a city called Stalingrad. If you remember one battle from the Eastern Front, this is the one. It changed absolutely everything. And forget those wide-open steppes we talked about. This was the exact opposite. This was fighting in the streets, in shattered apartment buildings, in factories. Soldiers fought tooth and nail for control of a single staircase, or even a single room. It was an absolute meat grinder that lasted for months. This fighting also shows us a really interesting clash in technology. You had the German tanks, like the famous Tiger. They were masterpieces of engineering, super powerful with thick armor. But they were also complicated and slow to build. On the other side, you had the Soviet T-34. It was simpler, maybe not as advanced, but it was tough, easy to fix, and they could build thousands of them. And in these conditions, that simple, rugged design often won the day. So Stalingrad is a massive victory for the Soviets, and from this point on, the war is moving in one direction:
west. The Soviet Red Army starts pushing, and now the Germans are the ones on the retreat.
It's a total reversal of fortune. The Soviets now have battle-hardened troops and a ton of new equipment pouring out of their factories. And for more than 2 years, it's just this slow, grinding push westward, taking back one ruined city after another.
And this long road ends in one place, Berlin. In April of 1945, the Soviet army surrounds the German capital. What follows is the final, desperate battle of the war in Europe, fought in the rubble and even in the subway tunnels, until finally the Soviet flag flies over the Reichstag.
So the fighting stops. But the story doesn't end there. In a lot of ways, this is just the beginning of dealing with the staggering, long-term impact. Let's talk about the human cost, because it is just almost impossible to comprehend. We're talking about tens of millions of people who lost their lives on the Eastern Front. Not just soldiers, but millions of civilians, too.
And the effects went way beyond the battlefield. Entire cities were just wiped off the map. The borders of countries in Europe were literally redrawn. And a new world order began to take shape, with the Soviet Union emerging as one of the world's 2 superpowers. This war basically set the stage for the next 50 years of global history.
So, when you look at all of this, the key takeaway is that you really can't understand the world we live in today without understanding what happened on the Eastern Front. And that leaves us with one final big question to think about. How do the echoes from a conflict this massive still affect us right here and right now?